Hello, thanks for coming to my channel. If you're new here and you like the sort of things I say, you like the content, please feel free to subscribe, share, and that applies to all existing subscribers as well. Thank you for all your support. Um, Now, just a quick word about the actual quality of my videos. When I look at these videos, there seems to be a sort of purplish blue tint, if I could put it that way. Someone recently brought my attention to, in his opinion, as he put it rather bluntly, the videos look like they're from 1993. Well, um, I can only work with what I've got, and this is what I've got at the moment. So, I try to make sure that the audio is okay. I don't get many complaints, so I assume that people watching it can hear it. If I have a video with 40, 50 views, um, if there was a real problem, I think there'd be a lot more comments saying no sound or something like that. And when there is, I try to address that. But for now, basically, this is what I'm working with. Um, when it comes to reviewing my channel, that might be something I have a look at to see if I can kind of amend the colorization or something. I don't know. Right. So last week, news has been utterly dominated by the fallout from Prince Harry and the Duchess of Sussex's interview. Oprah Winfrey, and there's a lot of back and forth on that. Clearly, it isn't going to just go away. I'll just say one brief thing about that before I got into the main point of this video. Um, I'm quite frustrated with the way that a lot of American commentators, left-wing commentators, I have to say, not Americans in general, are just swooping into this and thinking they know the whole story. Don Lemon on CNN, even the young poets who was at Biden's inauguration, uh, you know, Amanda Gorman, just checking her name there. Um, they're just coming in and assuming they know the whole story. Hillary Clinton's another example. And it's a very troubling trajectory, particularly in the United States, whereby allegations equal guilt. So because the Duchess has made these allegations of racism, or rather she's going on what Harry has said, then it must be true. Um, I mean, I suppose the palace hasn't denied it, so there's that, but I really dislike that trajectory of American discourse. We get it here as well to an extent, but I do think it's more intense over there, I have to say. Um, and that's, very frustrating because you get someone like Don Lemon who's in a powerful position. Just, he's entitled to his opinion, but for him to just come out and say, as a person of color, I can really relate to this, just assuming that what she is saying is correct. Also, Meghan Markle is not a black woman; she's a mixed race woman. So there's a lot of, I just think there's a lot of manipulation going on with the way this is being portrayed. But, and this is the point of this video, there are other things going on in the world. You know, I don't think this is going to be the fall of the Windsor dynasty. And I don't think it's a trivial story either. I think that, we can't just dismiss this as celebrity gossip or, tabloidish fallout. There is possibly serious implications with this. So from that point of view, it is a serious story. But there are other things going on in the world. In Burma, the situation really is bad. The death toll is mounting. The sheer savagery of the junta seems to know no bounds, and they're doing it in the eyes of the world. They don't care. The death toll, I think, is approaching 70 now. 70 people gunned down on the streets of Yangon and Mandalay. Um, One young woman has kind of become a symbol of this event. Her name's Mia Kiaozin. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. 18 or 19 years old. And at one protest, she was wearing a black t-shirt saying everything's going to be okay. And she was gunned down. And it's profoundly sad that this young woman, really a teenager, with the rest of her life ahead of her, has died for freedom, really. I mean, that's not an exaggeration. That's what this is about. What the Burmese junta is doing is despicable. It's not surprising. They've always been brutal. What's particularly abhorrent is that they have powerful backers like the Chinese Communist Party But then again, that's no surprise, given their own total callous disregard for human rights. How much can Western governments do? I think that there can be individual sanctions against generals, that sort of thing. Definitely cut off any um, sort of links they have in Western countries, whether it be business deals or anything like that. I think there's things that can be done. Can we stop the bloodshed on the street? Sadly, probably not. But I do think that we need to raise a voice. China, British-Chinese relations right now are very bad, and both sides will probably want to play it down. But our ambassador, Caroline Wilson, was summoned to the Chinese embassy. I mentioned this before. She had spoken on Chinese social media explaining the role of a free press. Now, in her job as ambassador, it's a political role, but it's also a cultural role. She's an ambassador for the United Kingdom. So I think it was very reasonable to put forward a Western point of view. And this is something I may comment more in detail because it really angered me, the arrogance of the Chinese regime. She pointed out that I'm sure that my counterpart in Britain, i.e., the Chinese ambassador to Britain, will be defending the 170 plus social media comments he made whilst ambassador to the UK. So these arrogant communists think that they can, you know, deprive foreigners of a voice, and yet they demand to have a voice in Western countries. I think it's pathetic, but it's also infuriating the arrogance that they have. And I personally think that we really need to take a hard line on this. I think we should be summoning the Chinese ambassador over the way our ambassador has been treated and getting him, it's a new person now, getting him or her to explain. Um, Put plainly, I'm sick of being pushed around by TCP. Not me personally, but you know, uh, Western countries. I think that we, for too long, have given them too much. One of my subscribers, Klaus, you mentioned that it takes a very, very long time to understand the Chinese thinking. I agree with that. And, I'm someone who has lived and worked in the country twice. I have a lot of Chinese friends and contacts. Admittedly, I don't often, in fact, I never talk to them about these issues for obvious reasons. Um, I would never call myself a China expert, but I think I've got a pretty good insight into the way the Chinese mind thinks. A lot of it is about, yes, they went through the century of humiliation, as they called it, in the last period of the Qing dynasty, when they were humiliated by European powers and by Japan. And I think a lot of this is about, in their mind, getting even. I really do. Um, but China is always in the news. China is never secondary because it's such an important role in this world. What's happening to the Uyghurs pretty much fits every definition of genocide. It's abhorrent. It's absolutely abhorrent. Um, so it's really not surprising that one brutal regime is backing another brutal regime. It's not necessarily that Beijing and Yangon have exact ideological similarities. They've had their differences, but they're both brutal totalitarian regimes. I'm talking about the junta in Burma, not the civilian government that's been deposed, and that's the difference. Because with the Chinese, there's really one government there, and they speak with one voice. In Burma, there is really two factions here. There's the civilian side, which is against this coup, and then there's the military junta side. I think at the UN, the UN should utterly disregard the junta's credibility as the representatives of Burma. But unfortunately, with the way the UN is, you have the Permanent Council, of which China is a member. I'm not sure what position India has taken on this, but China is propping up the regime, just as if they've always done with dictatorships the world over. They've done the same with Syria and the Assad regime. Um, so, there's a lot of things going on in the world. The situation in Yemen, of which I have to be honest, we do not come out squeaky clean on that one because of our support for the Saudis. That's a horrible situation. Horrible. Children are dying every day. It's the world's number one worst humanitarian crisis. even worse in Syria, even worse than the Tigray war in Ethiopia or the war in Afghanistan. It's a very, very grim situation. Um, and it just goes on every day. I really think, people who work on the front lines in those sort of situations, aid workers, missionaries, doctors, people who are really seeing this, they must really, really have mental health issues from what they see. Um, it's a horrible situation. And I just hope that the Saudis and the Houthis, are proud of the crisis that they've caused. The Houthis are not innocent. And that's just one caveat with this. It's kind of been framed as the West is backing the Saudis and the Saudis are responsible for the whole thing. Well, I would argue the Houthis are just as responsible. And of course, they're backed by Iran. Just proxy war going on between Riyadh and Tehran. And, it's the innocent Yemeni people who are suffering. Already the poorest country in the Middle East, and it's horrible. Um, what else? Huge federal funding for COVID in the United States from the Biden administration. I think it's one of the largest ever made. That's very important. It's going to be interesting to see what sort of effect that has. The American death toll from this is staggering, staggering. Over 500,000 dead. It's the biggest, it's actually the deadliest event in the history of the United States apart from the American Civil War. That's no exaggeration. Um, that really is sobering. That's including all the atrocities, all the wars, all the natural disasters that has taken place in the United States since 1776. It's just really puts it into context. So, looking at the world right now, one can easily get depressed and think it's a very grim situation. There's so many human rights abuses going on. There's not one but several genocides going on. Um, the situation for the press is worse than it was a couple of years ago in terms of press freedom around the world. Um, it just shows that we can never be complacent. For a while in the 2010s, there was optimism when various dictatorships were falling. I think that optimism, unfortunately, has now declined somewhat. Before I forget, today, the 11th of March, is technically the 12th now, but we mark exactly 10 years since the Japanese earthquake-tsunami, which was devastating for that country. At the time, the most expensive natural disaster, well, still is, in history. And of course, there was the famous Fukushima 50, the heroes of Fukushima, those people who went into the reactor after the disaster. Recently, they discovered the remains of a woman who died 10 years ago. So, this must have had a profound impact on the psyche of the Japanese people. Um, I remember that event very well. It was widely covered. And, there was one interesting thing. I think it was covered on, I can't remember if it was the BBC or Al Jazeera. This man kept going to a phone booth, a traditional phone booth, and he would get this phone and it was dead. There was no connection. But he would speak to his wife because during the disaster he had called her via that phone to her mobile, and she was one of the many who were lost. It's kind of poignant, so very sad. The Tokyo Olympics, there's a huge question mark over that. If they do go ahead, I think it will be like no Olympics ever because there'll be no international audiences. There'll be, I imagine, a lot of quarantine for international athletes. I do have a lot of sympathy for Japan. I mean, I understand the sentiments of those who don't want it to go ahead. But I do sympathise with the organisers and I do sympathise with all the athletes because, an Olympic Games is a huge event and Japan is they've already had to wait a year. And if it doesn't go ahead, all that planning, all that effort, goes out the window. And I know that the pandemic is a priority, but from a human point of view, one can sympathise profoundly. Um, but the world, I do believe that the world is never all bad. And this is where I want to close on a more positive note. One of the good things that's come out of the pandemic is ecologically, it's actually been quite good for wildlife. There are a lot of species that have apparently rebounded that were on the brink of extinction, and they're still in a fragile situation demographically speaking. But it's if you look around, there is some good news in that regard. If humpback whales are thought to be on the rebound, Bengal tigers, there's more now in the wild than there was in the past. That's those are things to welcome. Um, and I think that's a positive note to close on. There's other good things as well around the world, but I think I'll wrap it up there. I might do this periodically, this kind of roundup of news, rather than making specific videos on a particular subject, which I'll continue to do. But I think it's good to have a little roundup, and I'm sure there's other things going on that I haven't mentioned here. But it can look like it's very negative, but it's not always all bad. Um, quick word about the royal scandal. Boris Johnson has taken a very, standoff position. He won't comment on the royal family, just in case anyone watches that and thinks so. He's not allowed to criticize the Queen. That's not it. That's just his personal decision. Because I do think that a lot of the world will be looking at this and judging British culture, judging our constitutional monarchy. This is the point. It's a constitutional monarchy. They're not above criticism. We as British citizens can freely criticise the Queen and her family. There's no prohibition on that. That's a very important point to remember. And with that, I will wrap this up for now. Thanks for watching.